Hello everybody, video here for you today. This is the retro no-cap recap of The Curse of Oak Island Season 6 Episode 13 called The Paper Chase. Originally aired in February 2019. If you missed my recaps of previous and future episodes, there's a link to my Oak Island playlist in the upper right. Let's get into it. Previously, on the Curse of Oak Island, people have been looking for an incredible treasure for 229 years. The excavation of Smith's Cove continues. At this moment, they're continuing to unearth the concrete wall that Laird found at the end of the slipway in the final minutes of the previous episode. Rick asks Laird if he has seen anything like it, and the archaeologist replies, not underwater. The wall was buried 3 feet under the ocean floor. Gary gets no metal detector hits in the wall, which he says is a good thing. Rick tells Laird that the Romans had concrete that would set underwater. They made it by mixing volcanic ash, water, and other native minerals. Many believe that same sophisticated knowledge would have been required to construct this system of flood tunnels on Oak Island, believed to be similar to Roman aqueducts. Laird uncovers a part of the wall that has 2 plugged up pipes made of what appears to be rubber. Laird says he has found 1850s rubber before, presumably in Nova Scotia. No previous searcher groups have documented the wall. Rick says he thought Smith's Cove would be a straightforward dig, but it's just getting wonkier. Gary finishes the sentence. That didn't sound much like Gary. Rick says they have some research to do. Later in the war room, Marty suggests that the wall could be older and perhaps searchers, such as the 1850s Truro Company, found it, drilled holes in it, put the pipes in it to somehow factor in with their own excavation of Smith's Cove. Metal detection expert Gary Drayton says he thinks the slipway shown here that appears to terminate at the concrete wall is a large ramp that goes all the way to the money pit and that they will make finds along it. Marty says he'd like to dig underneath it, and Laird says he thinks it'll be worth it. Gary adds there might even be an older feature underneath. Rick and Dave visit with Dan Blankenship, who also excavated Smith's Cove in the early 1970s. Shortly after unearthing the U-shaped structure, the Laguna team did as well earlier this season. A storm destroyed his earthen cofferdam that put an end to the project. His son Dave tells Dan that it's 3 feet high, 5 feet thick, and has pipes in it. Dan says he has not seen anything like that and that it would have had to have been done before 1950 because the Restall family just did surface work in Smith's Cove. No real digging. Dan saw evidence of that surface work in 1965. Rick laments the fact that most searchers are concentrated on the treasure and were not as dedicated to documenting their finds. He makes a Star Trek reference when he says it wasn't their prime directive. Here's a rare drone shot from the west looking east that shows Oak Island Drive and Mahone Bay on the right side. And to the left of the garden shaft between the 2 white buildings is an uncovered borehole 10X. The excavation of the HI-8 caisson is continuing. As the caisson is oscillated deeper, a hammer grab is bringing up soil and anything else that may be in the caisson. From H8 the previous year, the spoils revealed parchment, leather bookbinding, and 2 human bones from the 1600s, one European and the other Middle Eastern. They also found possible evidence of the wooden box called the Chapel Vault, covered in concrete and first reported by searcher William Chappell in 1897. Unfortunately, the team believes that last year's efforts resulted in the caisson pushing the box off to the side and into a void at 170 feet down. The current project is pulling the caisson back out of the hole in hopes that anything that got moved out of the way will fall back into the hole. The hammer grab brings up a bunch of pieces of splintered wood, and the team thinks they are possibly pieces of the chapel vault. Jack washes the spoils manually so that they can be checked more carefully. He finds more wood, but also this that he thinks is more parchment. William Chappell found traces of gold and a piece of parchment that had the letters VI on it on his drill bit during his 1897 drilling efforts. Jack also found the previous parchment out of H8. He finds even more parchment in the next spoils down. Under a microscope, that first piece of parchment is determined to be leather. The actual parchment reveals pigments applied to it, including the vertical line in the upper left. Doug says it reminds him of the way the first letter of a paragraph in old books would be larger and stylized, a practice that goes back to the 400s AD. As the H8 hammer grab excavation continues, our author, Randall Sullivan, returns to the island. He wrote a Rolling Stone magazine article about Oak Island in 2004, and at the time of this episode, was shot in 2018, he was about to release a book called The Curse of Oak Island. Good title. The first two copies go to Rick and Marty. Rick asks Randall what is the most compelling piece of evidence for him, and the author says the totality of the work, the amount of labor and commitment. He says he has always had a hard time believing that people would do all that just to hide treasure. He is a proponent of the Sir Francis Bacon theory that he brought Shakespeare's original and other manuscripts to Oak Island and put them in a lead chest filled with mercury for protection. If Randall were in charge, he would be looking for an interest that is now underwater. Near the H8 caisson, rock equipment owner and CEO Vanessa Lucido updates Rick, Marty, and Craig. After pulling up the caisson past where it possibly encountered the chapel vault, 8 feet of material fell into the hole, and on top of that, 16 new feet of material jarred loose by the can oscillating all the way back down. For a total of 24 feet of material, they are hammer grabbing. Going through yet more H8 spoils, Jack finds what he thinks is another piece of parchment. Dan Hinsky finds what he thinks is another piece of bone. And I'll be continuing retro no-cap recaps of season 6 through 8 during the summer and early fall. All of the other episodes are already done and are in my Oak Island playlist. I'm also doing no-cap recaps of the current season of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which has its own playlist, and I'll eventually start doing retro no-cap recaps of seasons 1 through 4 of that series. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Siempre avanti.